War, nationalism, empire, revenge. These aren't just words, they are the forces that have shaped history for thousands of years. And in 1922, these forces collided in one of the most devastating conflicts the modern world had ever seen, the Greco-Turkish War. A struggle that would redefine borders, shape national identities, and forever alter the course of history. This was not just a battle between two nations, it was a conflict that would determine the fate of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Welcome to the story of the Greco-Turkish conflict of 1922, a turning point in history that still reverberates today. Imagine ancient rivals with centuries of history, Greece and Turkey, each fueled by dreams of glory and haunted by the ghosts of their empires. When Greece invaded Turkish lands, it set off a firestorm that would engulf the region and spark a national struggle that would shape the destiny of both countries. But how did this conflict start? What drove two proud nations into this brutal war? And how did 1922 become the year that changed the course of history? To understand the Greco-Turkish War, we must go back to the closing years of the First World War, when the Ottoman Empire, long known as the sick man of Europe, was on its last legs. Having sided with the Central Powers in the Great War, the Ottomans were on the losing side in 1918. The Treaty of Sèvres, signed in 1920, divided up the Ottoman Empire's vast territories, leaving it a shadow of its former self. But one area was still hotly contested: Anatolia, the heartland of the Turkish people. The Greeks saw this as their opportunity to revive their ancient dream of a greater Greece, an empire that would stretch across the Aegean Sea and include regions they believed were rightfully theirs. Backed by the Allied powers, Greece made a bold and fateful decision. They launched an invasion. On May 15, 1919, Greek troops landed in Smyrna, a move that would ignite the flames of war. To the Greeks, this was a triumphant return to the birthplace of their ancestors. To the Turks, it was an invasion, an existential threat to the new Turkish nation struggling to be born from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. Enter Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the man who would go on to become the founder of modern Turkey. Ataturk was a soldier, a visionary, and a man with a singular goal: to save his people from the brink of destruction. After the devastation of World War I, Turkey was in chaos. But Ataturk united the people, inspiring a wave of Turkish nationalism that would not only resist the Greek invasion, but ultimately reshape the destiny of the Middle East. Ataturk wasn't just building an army, he was building a nation. With the Greeks advancing into Anatolia, he rallied his people with a simple but powerful message: "This is our land, and we will not let it be taken from us." The stage was set for one of the most crucial showdowns in the 20th century. As the war progressed, Greek forces pushed deep into Anatolia, even advancing toward Ankara, the seat of Ataturk's government. The Greek army, emboldened by early successes, believed they could deal a decisive blow and force the Turks to surrender. But this was no ordinary war. The Greeks were marching into hostile territory, far from their supply lines and facing an increasingly determined Turkish resistance. The deeper they advanced, the more vulnerable they became. Greek troops found themselves overstretched, and Turkish guerrilla fighters began to harass their supply lines. Ataturk knew that time was on his side, and he bided his time, preparing for the decisive moment when the tide would turn. And then, in August 1921, the moment came. The Greeks had advanced as far as the Sakarya River, just 80 kilometers from Ankara. It was here that Ataturk and his forces made their stand in one of the longest and bloodiest battles of the war. For 21 days, the two sides clashed in brutal combat. Greek forces were on the offensive, but Turkish resilience would not break. By the end of the battle, it was clear: the Greeks had been repelled. Ataturk's forces not only held the line but launched a counterattack that sent the Greeks into a full retreat. The Battle of Sakarya was a turning point, a defining moment in the creation of modern Turkey. From this point on, the Greeks would be on the defensive. With Greek forces in retreat, the war reached its tragic climax in September 1922, when Turkish forces entered the city of Smyrna. What followed was one of the darkest chapters of the conflict, the Great Fire of Smyrna. The city, once a cosmopolitan hub of Greek, Armenian, and Turkish culture, was reduced to ashes. Thousands were killed, and countless more were forced to flee as refugees. The destruction of Smyrna marked the final blow to Greek ambitions in Anatolia. The war was over, and Greece was forced to withdraw, but the human cost was immense. For the Greeks, it was a devastating defeat. For Turkey, it was the birth of a new nation. With the war over, the two nations sat down to negotiate the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923. This treaty would not only redraw the borders of Greece and Turkey, but also set the stage for one of the largest forced population exchanges in history. Over 1 million Greeks were relocated from Turkey to Greece, while hundreds of thousands of Turks were sent in the opposite direction. It was a humanitarian catastrophe, but one that was seen as necessary to ensure peace between the two nations. The wounds of this population exchange would take generations to heal, and the legacy of the Greco-Turkish War still lingers in both countries. Today, Greece and Turkey are both modern nations, but the scars of the Greco-Turkish War remain. The war not only defined the borders of the two nations, but also their national identities. It marked the end of the Ottoman Empire and the birth of modern Turkey. For Greece, it was the end of the Megali idea, the dream of a greater Greece. But as history has shown time and time again, the past is never truly behind us. The tensions between Greece and Turkey persist, and the question remains, will these ancient rivals ever fully reconcile, or are they destined to repeat the cycles of history?